Well, you've had a distinguished time in Ashland because you've actually been involved. Let me just move this slightly because I can't see myself. There we go. You've been involved in the Ashland Shakespeare Festival, which might be the most famous of the art institutions in Asheville. How did you find moving into theater on the board? Different from the music business because I mean they are different.
They're very different. But I wasn't an actor or a director or anything. I was on the board of directors with the Shakespeare Festival. And really what I kind of found was that whether it's the music industry, whether it's theater, whether it's the publishing industry, in some ways, arts is arts. The products may be slightly different, but a lot of the concepts and the way you market and just how you deal with creative people are very similar. So I quite honestly found it a very interesting and easy transition. I became friends with a number of the actors. And as I become friends with a number of the authors, because I also work at Blackstone Publishing, I'm not just an author for them, and I've become friends with many of the authors there. So I just find I'm attracted to creative people, and I've just been around them my whole life, while at the same time having a solid business background as well.
Well, that is an interesting combination. Now, I mean, I have spent a lot of time in the publishing and bookselling aspect of creative arts, and I can tell you that chaos generally rules, despite the effort to, reduce marketing to data mining and other stuff. It is an unpredictable world. Nobody can really tell what, quote, the next big thing will be until they see it. And by then it's kind of too late. I was just thinking about that with a new book out by Nina Prost called The Maid. And I really liked it. She's Canadian, so she couldn't autograph books for us. I didn't really know what to do with it. So I bought in at what I thought was a reasonable level. Too bad I didn't triple it. But that was before it. I mean, you can kind of read the tea leaves sometimes for books like that. And it's hard to back if you're trying to run at least a break-even operation, let alone a profitable operation. You can afford to take risks, but you can't, just go crazy. You can't buy hundreds of copies of anything that you think might be fabulous. And sometimes you get caught somewhat flat-footed because it takes off in a way that you didn't anticipate. And other times you can buy into something thinking it's a sure thing, and it really tanks. It's certainly true with the theater. You can have what you think is a great hit, and it can be awful. I imagine the music business is the same. You just don't know for sure what the next gold record is going to be.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In fact, there was a time when one of the artists I worked with was Yanni. I don't know if you remember Yanni or not.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing okay with his album. And then he went on a major talk show with his wife. And the next day we had orders for like 500,000 albums. You just can't predict that necessarily. And so you're absolutely right. And especially with newer debut, whether it's musical artists, plays, or authors, you can't predict these things. You can only pray for them.
Well, that's really true. And of course, there are more platforms, and that makes it unpredictable. We have not really gone into book talk, TikTok and book talk, possibly because we're so overwhelmed at the moment. None of us has time to try to figure it out. But there is an author who is doing extraordinarily well called Colleen Hoover, who I understand, I may be wrong on this, so don't flame me if I'm saying this incorrectly, but she's apparently a TikTok success, which has shot her up, her paperbacks up to top of bestseller lists. And I mean, I'm sort of, both pleased, aghast, and amazed all at the same time, because this isn't part of the book world that I am familiar with, but the signal is there that we should rapidly become familiar with it. And here in the music business, you went all the way from, wax to tape to, CD to streaming and all, and technology really can change, can't it? How things are done and what becomes popular.
Oh, totally. There's no question of that. Technology has changed every industry to some degree, and especially publishing in the music industry, and the marketing in and the sale of and everything.
Well, it's true, the marketing, but in the end, this book a codex, and it's called a codex because this is the form. It is pages that are cut, trimmed, glued together, or in old days, sewn together with leather bindings and stuff. And you read it in a way that we're familiar with, which is a huge improvement over scrolls. Because that was, if you go back and look like at the Great Library of Alexandria, which burned when Vesuvius went up, it was all scrolls. So even book technology has changed a bit, but way slower than almost anything else. And, despite the predictions that digital books and ebooks were going to destroy print books, they really haven't.
No, thank God. I prefer reading a book that I hold in my hand personally.
It's an amazingly enduring technology and format.
Yes.
So here you are, having done all these amazing things, deciding to become an author. Now, I know we talked just a moment before this started. You joined a writing group in Ashland. And why did you do that? And how did it push you towards publishing a novel?
Well, I joined it because my next door neighbor, who was a poet in the group, and I became friendly. And she just one day to me said, "Do you write at all?" And I said, "Well, I've written nonfiction, some, magazine and newspaper things. And I don't know, I've thought about writing." And she said, "Why don't you join the group?" And so I just joined the group and I started listening to what the other members of the group are writing. And one day I just got an inspiration. I have no other way to describe it other than the storyline for a short story popped into my head, and there it was. And I started writing it down. When I say writing it, typing it on my computer. And that was a different story, but it fueled my interest and my enthusiasm for writing. And in about 2015, this story that became the Scorbion book popped into my head, and I didn't have a name for the character. All I knew was that what came into my head was a story set about a new police inspector who solves his cases in a barbershop in countryside England in 1910. That was there from the start. I don't know why or how, other than the fact that I love mysteries. I've consumed them as a reader my whole life of that nature. And I just went with it, and I started transcribing what I saw playing in my brain, and it became the genesis of this book.
Amazing. Wow. So really, 1910 England was even slightly before the golden age of mystery. We can go back and think about the great English practitioners of that, not just Sayers and Christie and all, but people like Tay and Allingham and Niall Marsh, who's one of my all-time favorites and has a great theatrical connection. And many guys, any of you who've been paying attention to the British Library crime classics will know that there is there are hundreds of them by now. We sell them. Poison Pen Press, in fact, publishes them.
Cool.
An effort to bring writers of that style and that time that were not the front runners. They were not the Sayers and the Christie and all, but really solid writers back into print for people to enjoy. So you've written a book that really kind of ties into a revival of interest in the golden age of mystery. But did you yourself have a reading background in some of those classics, or did you just decide that 1910 England was going to be a fun place to set a book?
No, I was a pretty heavy reader my whole life, and I was a mystery reader. So I started with the Hardy Boys, and and from there I've read every Sherlock Holmes story and book, of most, if not every, Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple book, and then it went from there. Father Brown, everything, Chandler, Hammett, Chester Himes, Rex Stout, Ellery Queen. I mean, the ones you mentioned, I just have loved mysteries, and some of them were not set then, but some of them were. And I just loved the whole concept of a kind of a colorful, interesting mystery with cool characters.
Well, you created a cute place called Haxford, so we can have an English village mystery. I mean, I love, authors like John. I'm not even sure whether it's Bood or Booty, Bude, wrote a number of redefined Golden Age mysteries in rural England that have been reset. Mary Kelly actually won a gold dagger, and I'm thinking she beat out John McCurry for the gold dagger. But that's right, for a book called The Spoilt Kill. And it's set up in the potteries in England. It's a marvelous book, and then it just vanished. So I'm really excited that there's a revival of both interest in printing. I mean, because we can't sell them if nobody makes them. For books like that. But it's interesting to find a modern author, not from the Golden Age, who's basically chosen to write in that context. And Pignon Scorbion, Pignon, if you're interested, I looked it up, is either a pine nut, right?
It can be, yes.
Or can be. And I'm trying to remember what the other thing is that it can be. I just looked it up and now my mind's gone blank. Well, anyway, it's an actual word. Scorbion. If you try to Google it, you'll just get scorpion. So that's not going to help you. But it's an interesting name. Why did you choose both the front name and the first name and the last name for this character? Why did you choose Pignon Scorbion?
The part of what came to me in inspiration was that his father would be of Egyptian descent and his mother Haitian. And so what I started doing was researching Arabic and Egyptian last names, family surnames. And I came upon Scorbion, which is a name of that type. And it stood for, the meaning was entrepreneurial, assertive, just really great traits that in the book his father exhibits. So I thought it would be a really good family name because it kind of said who his father was. And then in the book, I have his father venturing in a ship to Haiti and meeting the mother in Haiti, Pignon's mother there. And she lived in a real place in Haiti called Pignon. And it was a mountain and a valley in the innards, as opposed to on the coast of Haiti. And that's how he got named for his mother's valley and his father's last name. And I just liked the way the two names fit together. I wanted a character name that was not run of the mill, but that people would go, what exactly does that mean? Where did it come from? And, Sherlock Holmes is not your everyday name, nor is Hercule Poirot. So I just kind of thought I'd like something similar. And I liked the way those names worked together. And that
makes perfectly good sense. I've now remembered that Pignon is either a pine nut or it's a gable. It's an architectural term, like a gable of a house. Now, I'm a French-speaking person, so I call him Hercule Poirot. I do not call him, Hercules Poirot or whatever it is. But he's Belgian. He's not actually French. He's Belgian, but he's from the French-speaking part of Belgium. And I've always thought that Poirot was it's such a recognizable, such an interesting name that it makes perfectly good sense for you to have, searched for one that would be sort of similar, and Scorbion would certainly work. So you've made him a police inspector. He goes to this little town in 1910. And really what you've written, I think, is not so much one novel, although there are threads that pull through, but three novellas or stories that you've put together. So it's almost like, and that was a Golden Age thing to do too, was to have cases, not just one like big thriller format, but a succession of cases. So that's what you have done here. There are three main ones. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the first one and progress on?
Well, without trying to give away too much, the first one is about a fortune seeker who comes to town and claims to be the illegitimate son of a wealthy merchant and what happens there. And then the second one has to do with a murder at a traveling circus. And the third one has to do with the theft of a hog, which leads to the murder of the hog's owner. And it's tied into the theft of a tomahawk that had been given as a gift to a doctor in the frontiers days of the old American West. And these are all tied in the book. And you know, to your point, I tried to write the book almost as a line of succession of days. And in the life of a police inspector, there could be more than one case going on at any one time. And so I really tried to capture well, there could be these cases. And I've just finished writing the first draft of the second book, and there are multiple cases in that as well. And I enjoy writing that way. I think I have fun writing it, so I'm hoping people have fun reading it.
I think they will. I mean, you're absolutely right that it's a police person would never have just one case on the go. They would always have multiple. There was a woman named Del Shannon also. Sure. I think her real name was Elizabeth Leinington, and then she had one other pseudonym, which I can't recall at the moment. And I always loved the fact that her books involved cops that were working more than one case. And there might be like one major case, you know, right, kind of like a through case. But then Lieutenant Luis Mendoza and his squad would end up working other cases. And occasionally another case would cast light on the more difficult, larger case. And sometimes right, they were just completely separate. I think Ed McBain in the 87th Precinct series, he did the same. You know, they would have different investigations going on. And so it certainly would be true that Pignon would. What makes him different is the locale and the people that he pulls together. So Leslie Egan, thank you, Patrick. Patrick is so wonderful. He comes up out of the ether to remind me. So Del Shannon, Elizabeth Leinington, and Leslie Egan. My mother, who was a phenomenal mystery reader and brought me up to read them the same, those were among her very favorite authors. And it was partly for the verisimilitude, the unpretentious style, but partly because it felt like real working police departments that she wrote about.
Well, I tried to capture that as well in the sense that I wanted to write it in a way that even though it was fiction, people maybe could go suspend belief and go, oh, this could have happened. You know, this is fun. It's you know, it's maybe real. And I know it's not real, but you know, I tried to write it in that style, if you will.
Well, you know, it was in the English legal tradition. When there was a death, a coroner who was some kind of a local guy would summon people to an inquest most of the time in the local pub because, you know, there really wasn't anywhere else to do it. And they would bring in it's sort of a version of our grand jury, but they would bring in witnesses and try to determine whether it was an accident, a suicide, or murder. And I felt like when you set this in the barbershop and the various people there, that you were in a way mirroring this old English idea of, you know, people coming to the pub and the coroner sitting up on some higher spot, testing out the room, taking, you know, and oftentimes, there would be theories advanced about what happened. So did you have that in mind when you decided to put it in the barbershop with the barbers to be part of the investigation?
I was aware of that, but I can't say that I used it as my example of doing it. Again, it just kind of came to me one day as I was sitting at the computer, and it was like, wow, it would be cool to do it in a barbershop and make him the kind of a police inspector who is more collegial and would work with people rather than, I'm going to do it and everybody else stay out of my way. And so I just came up with the barbers and the shoe shine man and the reporter and the bookstore owner. And I just thought it'd be really cool to have a group of an ensemble, if you will, of amateur sleuths assisting. And yes, I was aware of the pub thing, but I wanted a different environment.
Well, it wasn't always the pub, but much of the time that was the center of the village, and so that's the way it happened to work out. No, I like your group approach. The other thing that's interesting is that your lead case here of the missing heir is the plot that they actually you can't do anymore, right? I mean, in 1910, you could have this guy show up and say, "Wait, the linen draper was my dad. My mother on her deathbed said, he was my father." But today, they just whip out and do a DNA test, and the whole thing would fall by the wayside. It's really a shame that technology has spoiled a lot of good plots, but so it is. So in 1910, you were able to have this young man. Well, he isn't that young at this point. He's in his 30s, isn't he? Show up. Yes. And claimed that this other man was his father. And a lot of it was based upon similar look. He looked as though he could be the son of this father. But the father and the father's wife, the putative father and the father's wife, rebut this. Although then the father does go on to say that he sold some wild oats before he was married. And so conceivably, he was conceived, right? But then that story plays all the way through the book, all the way to the end, doesn't it?
Yes. And I did that purposefully rather than start it and end it and start the next one. I just liked the convention, for lack of a better way of putting it, of starting it, going to another story, another crime, Pignon coming back to it and going, I'm missing something, and then coming another one, coming back to it, and then summing it up with the finality of that first case. And I will tell you, I did a ton of research to get this book right. And part of what you were talking about is what I had to research and what was available in 1910 and where fingerprinting was at the time. Certainly there was no DNA typing, but even fingerprinting was in its really infancy. So it really, I had to come up with other ways that his claim could either be verified or disputed rather than fingerprints or DNA.
Well, yeah, no, there's no real forensic technique around. And, it's like Dickens' Bleak House and some of the really great missing heir plots. There's even Josephine Tay, one of her very best books, one I love, called Brat Farrar, which is set, I think, in the 1930s. Even then, claims of lost heirs were very difficult to prove or disprove. It's not dissimilar, to the current Me Too thing, where accusations can arise, and there's no really good way to either prove them, and there's no way for the person accused to really refute them. I mean, it's kind of a credibility thing, which was unfortunately true in rape cases forever until forensic evidence makes it a lot more possible to prove there was an actual rape. But, for years, the strategy of trying someone for rape was to try the victim, not try the rapist, because it became a kind of one word against another. And so if you could destroy the credibility of the accuser, you could get the guy off the hook, where today with forensic evidence, there's no real shot of that. Exactly. And of course, people then go to all kinds of great lengths to try to beat the forensic stuff. So it just goes on and on. Right. But I did like the missing heir thing because it's a plot I've always enjoyed. And so I was happy to see it.
Well, good.
Coming into focus here. Tell me about circuses. I mean, what is it that attracts so many people to setting a mystery in a circus? I mean, is it like a childhood thing coming back, or is it the fact that people in the circus oftentimes are not leading their quote authentic selves, but are dressed up to be or pretending to be something different? What drew you to the circus?
I've always loved circuses. I mean, obviously there are people in life who are deathly afraid of clowns and things like that.
That's right.
But I think in general, most people like a circus. It's an escape from reality. You get to see feats that I'm forgetting television now, which has brought some circus acts, into your living room. But traditionally, you couldn't, there were things going on in circuses. You didn't see the animals that were in circuses or the kinds of performers anywhere but in a circus. So it was the greatest show on earth. And it was an escape from reality. And I think people loved being in that environment, smelling the sawdust and, seeing all these things that are foreign to them, if you will. And I always loved circuses. I've been to many in my life. And I thought it would be a really fun environment. And again, I did a lot of research as to what the circuses were like in that era, because they're very different then than they are now. And that's actually one of my favorite parts of the book, is the whole circus thing.
Oh, circuses are wonderful. I'm trying to remember where we were in Europe not too long ago. Might have been 3 or 4 years ago, before the Frankfurt Book Fair. It might have been Vienna or somewhere. Anyway, there was a small circus that, had come to town and pitched his tent and all, and it was just rocking. I mean, we were out for a walk and you could hear, gales of laughter and excitement and squealing and all. We look over, there's the small top, not a big top, but there's the small top, and it's all lit up and all of it. And we realized that people had turned out, for the circus. And, America contributed to that with Wild West shows, which were hugely popular in France, but also toured England. And, they would have, what's his name? Wild Bill.
Bill Hickok. Oh, no, Buffalo Bill Cody.
Buffalo Bill, right. And Annie Oakley and whatever, and they would show off their writing skills and their shooting skills. Yeah. And Annie Get Your Gun, in fact, is a whole show based on that, which is a movie from my childhood. I don't know if anybody even knows what Annie Get Your Gun is. Well, people as old as we are can remember. Was it Betty Hutton? Wasn't she the star? It was Betty Hutton. She was the,
Yeah, I think it was Betty.
Yeah. Right. She was little and blonde and, learned how to shoot a rifle while standing on the back of a horse and, the whole 9 yards. But I mean, circuses had magic, kids used to run away to join the circus, and you could, I think there were 2 things about it that were really appealing. One is that you could reinvent yourself as some different character, but also people found it was a found family thing that there was a very familiar feeling to a circus, because they performed together, ate together, traveled together, and the whole bit. So you have the adolescent who runs away from home to join the circus, but basically he finds a new family and
exactly
the whole bit. So I think that idea of reinvention in family had a lot to do with the magic of circus. I went to one. I grew up in Winnetka, north of Chicago, and I remember my grandfather taking me to the Ringling Brothers. I'm trying to remember. They must have been in Soldiers Field, now that I think about it, in Chicago, anyway, with the giant tents. Right. And I remember I was just 7 or something, and I can remember how mesmerized I was by the trapeze artists.
Yes.
I mean, it was so, the animals were fun, and the midway was fun, and all the rest of it. But the trapeze artists were, don't we all want to fly? So, there we were. So I can see why you had a good time with this. Now you say you're doing a second book. So are you repeating this format? Are the barbershop people still part of this group?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, in the second book, one of the things I set out to accomplish, which I hope I did, is even go a little bit more into their backgrounds and expand their characters. So the core 7 of them, Pignon and the 6 who assist him, they're there. The Dr. Morgan is still there. His Constable Adley is there. And then there's a whole new cast of characters with new crimes.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad you're having such a good time with that. I'm going to call Patrick up, because Patrick is going to want to geek over the music with you, because, I can tell that he's really knowledgeable about it and I am not. So Patrick, here's your chance to walk through the music world of the 70s, 80s, and 80s with Rick.
Well, I mean, you mentioned a couple of the artists that you've worked with. They seem to kind of be all over the place. Was there any focus that you had? This was the late 70s. Was that more the beginning, kind of the disco era, or?
Well, actually, I started playing in bands as a musician in the late 50s when I was 15, 16 years old, and was part, my bands were part of the British invasion. We were, trying to emulate the Beatles and whatever. And then I started producing records, and then I went into the business end. And the business end I went into, you're exactly right at the disco era. And in fact, I produced a record called 7654321 Blow Your Whistle that popularized whistles and discotheques. And it sold 500,000 copies and went to number 3 on the disco charts. And then I got involved with, but I was involved with everything. Even before I went into that, a record company I was with was into country music. So I started working country music. And in the early days, I worked Reba McEntire and the Statler Brothers and acts like that. And then I worked everything from the Village People, Donna Summer, the Bee Gees. I mean, the disco era I was a part of, both as a producer and as an executive. And then I was working country acts, rock acts, rap acts. I worked one of the earliest rap acts, Curtis Blow.
Oh, wow.
And I worked Tone Loc and Young MC and Wu-Tang Clan, and I worked Brooks and Dunn, and I had a phenomenal career. And then I did all of these soundtracks where I did a lot of soundtrack marketing, and I enjoyed that too, because having a film background from film school, I really knew how important the music was to film. And so I was able to marry the marketing of the music to leading in and creating, and people wanting the film because they were already familiar with the hit music from it.
Sure.
And so I don't know, I just had a varied career that never got dull, let me put it that way.
Did you spend a lot of time in Miami?
I actually went to the University of Miami for the first 3 years of college, and then I transferred to NYU where I got my degrees. And I actually got my first job as a promotion man in Miami for Colpix Records. And while I was in college, and I was playing in bands there, and then I would go back to Miami. My son lives in the Miami area, one of my sons. So I go back to Miami. I was one of the first acts that ever recorded at Criteria Studios down there. And They became like one of the biggest studios in the world. Clapton did all the Bee Gees, a lot of acts recorded there.
Yeah, I saw that Bee Gees documentary that came out not too long ago, which was kind of sad in a lot of ways. But, it talks about that whole sort of disco, probably mounds of cocaine everywhere, and that scene in the late 70s, early 80s.
I was very lucky because I knew I had an addictive personality. So yeah. I decided never to do any kind of hard drugs. And I probably am here today because of that.
Right.
You and Mick Jagger and what's his name?
Keith Richards.
Keith Richards is going to outlive us all.
Yeah, Keith Richards. I feel like Keith Richards probably is entirely made up of artificial substances. There's no actual organic matter left in Keith Richards, so he'll just go on forever like a totem pole.
Well, fortunately, I skipped all that, thank goodness.
Did you see that great picture at the beginning of the pandemic? It showed Keith out on a balcony with a drinking a cigarette. The caption is, "Hey, where's everybody gone?"
No, I didn't, but I believe that.
Survive. Let me see if we have some questions. Let's see. Okay, yeah, let's see. Linda, she says, did you intend to film and market the plays? This is going back to the beginning of the conversation. She says, I've seen many and took students to Macbeth and Much Ado. The themes are still so relevant.
I can answer that in two ways. In terms of filming the plays at the Shakespeare Festival, I'm assuming we're talking about the Shakespeare Festival. It's something that we had discussed every single year I was on the board, and I'm sure before I was on the board and after. And part of the issue were union rules and regulations and what could and couldn't be done. And so there was a desire to do it, but maybe not a practicality to do it. However, once I got to Blackstone Publishing, what we did was we started recording audio versions of the Shakespeare canon. So we used the actual actors of the productions and the directors and recreated them for audio in the studios. And in fact, some of them won Grammy Awards for Best Spoken Word recordings. So we weren't able to do it visually, but we could do it sonically.
I'm seeing kind of the crossroad here, because Blackstone, you may have already mentioned this, did get its start, and for many years was a audio only, was it not?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
just a few years ago, they got into publishing in a big way. So I can see how you got into it from the recording, producing side of it.
Actually, I if you don't mind a quick short anecdote.
Yeah.
I had moved to Ashland to retire, basically. And I joined all these nonprofits so I would have something to do. And I kind of got bored out of my mind. And a very good friend of mine who lives up in Portland happened to own the audio rights to Winnie the Pooh. And so he came down here to Ashland to license them to Blackstone, and he stayed at my house. And my wife, by the way, was also a senior executive in the music industry. So we were all friendly. And he came back from his meeting with Craig Black, who founded and owned and still owns Blackstone. And he told us that he did the deal with him for Winnie the Pooh, but he also told him about my wife, Deborah, and I, and said, you should meet with them because they've got kind of New York corporate knowledge and that maybe you could use in the company. So Craig and Deborah and I had lunch the next week. And at the end of the lunch, Craig said, I really don't know what I'm going to do with you, but I know you've got something you contribute to my company. And he hired us as consultants and to be on his first board of directors. And Deborah then retired after that. And I went on to become an employee. And that's how I got connected to Blackstone.
How long ago was that?
That was
a wonderful story.
2000.
And they're still doing Audible, aren't they?
I'll answer both. That was in 2006 or 7. It was toward the end of 6, beginning of 7. Blackstone started in 1987 as an audio book only company, right, and still does. We have a catalog, I think, of over 30,000 audio books. But in 2015, we went into print and ebook and started doing what we call all rights. And we started with by obtaining the Louis L'Amour and Max Brand catalogs. And then I was fortunate enough to be able to secure books by PC Cast and the James Clavell catalog and the Gregory MacDonald catalog. And then we just took off from there. And today we still do at least 1,000 audio books a year, and we're doing 100 or more print and ebooks every year, all new works.
That's wonderful. One of the things that we've been able to do in the pandemic in Zoom, which miraculously came along just when we all needed it, was to do events where it might not have been practical in terms of authors touring or coming to the store. And it's very difficult, especially for a first-time author, it's not difficult. I mean, it's easy for them to come, but it's difficult to acquire a big audience or, to make an initial visit pay well. We never cared about that, but it's harder for other bookstores to do it. But Zoom, reduces the overhead to the point that you can do a lot of things that you would not have thought were financially feasible before.
I agree. Although I will tell you, Poison Pen is an iconic bookstore. And, any author that wouldn't want to go there is crazy. So let me just say that.
Thank you. We really miss it. And in fact, we have recognized, Patrick and I, that we've kind of lost our game a little bit when we've done a few live events. We're all kind of staggering around a little bit going, how do we do that?
Exactly.
But we have some coming up. We have one this Thursday with Heather Gudenkoff. We have one Saturday with Mark Rainey. I'm seeing a real mix of live and virtual events particularly in April, some in March, but more heavily in April and May. And, I got a query today, about an event at the end of May, and the publicist said, what are your COVID protocols? And I wrote her back and I said, I have absolutely no idea what they will be at the end of May.
Right.
I mean, there's no point in bringing it up now because things keep changing so often. But I think it's going to be a mix, Rick. I think we're going to see a lot of virtual events and a lot of live events, and we're all going to find our way forward. But we get to do stuff with virtual events, mixing it in that we would not have done ever in the past. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to do a live event with our local independent bookstore here in Ashland. And because of COVID, we decided that we would postpone it until the spring and hope that COVID, kind of wanes a bit and it makes it safer for everybody.
I think, to be honest, I think reading the tea leaves, I think more and more people are just so tired of the whole, if you are vaccinated and boosted, the chances are you're not going to lose your life if you catch it. It could be a miserable experience. If you have underlying health reasons, you're certainly more in danger. But for most people, I think that, everybody's kind of tired of it all.
Yes, I agree.
So I think each of us has to be personally responsible for, for ourselves and how we choose to do this. So at some point, we're still asking for masks, but at some point we're going to have to give that up, and the staff can stay masked. And, we've given up food, for example, because you can't ask people to come to the store and then feed them. Our events were wonderful. They were absolutely loaded with food and drink. We had one staff member who bakes, and I think he really misses it. Don't you, Patrick?
John, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was famous for his particular baked goods and everything, and he would show up, with, we can't do that right now.
Yeah.
Because there's no point in saying come masked and then, where you can take it off and have a
Right.
really doesn't fly.
Although, we should just ask him to make some baked goods for the staff. I bet he would do it.
You can certainly do that. I'm
have
sure
to do that.
Delighted. Yeah. And we're going to make something wrapped for Joanne Fluke, because of the food thing.
Well, she brings all of her stuff.
Anyway, I honestly think by the time we get through this year, unless there's some variant that we don't yet see that is going to be ghastly, then we're going to more or less return to, more ordinary life. And it'll be like, an annual flu shot.
Kind of Darwinian. It does get a little Darwinian after a while. It's like, you don't get the shot. I mean, anyway, I don't want to get into that because I'm irritated. But I do have a few questions here.
Sure.
Come in. Sabina says Keith Richards had many blood transfusions. That may be urban legend. I don't know. What do you think? Is that apocryphal?
I have no idea.
It was a great story.
No idea.
Let's see. Michelle. Yeah, let's see. Where is she? I just lost her. Hey, Michelle. She watches a lot of our programs. We appreciate the support. She says, I read with audiobooks a lot, and I listen to a sample of your narrator. Let's see. And I listened to a sample of your narrator, and he has the ability, sorry, these keep moving, to have excellent different accents. Did you get involved with the choice of the actor for the audio version? I'm sure you did.
I was involved, but not yes, but not no. I mean, I was involved, but I'm not the expert in narrations. We have people at Blackstone who that's what they do, and that's what they did.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'd love to take credit for it, but no, not me.
It is an art form, finding somebody really good. It really makes a difference.
Oh, it does.
Let's see here. Nancy says, your book just arrived. It is 8 p.m. here. Should I start to read the book now or wait till tomorrow?
You could read the first story. You could read, you don't have to read the entire book at once, but you could certainly wait in there and read the first case.
I would agree.
She's going to be up at 3 a.m. Let's see here. Sabina also, she says again, my teacher, Ellie Alexander. Yes, we know her, lives in Ashland.
Yes, I know Ellie.
Yeah, she's been here, hasn't she, Barbara?
You know, I don't know for sure because John Charles has done so many events on his own that, you know,
I
I'm not
think we
familiar
did.
with it all.
Yeah, I know we've done a virtual event, or else I'm pretty sure. Let's see here. It looks like that is about it for the moment.
Wonderful. Well, Rick, it's really been a great pleasure to meet you and to talk to you. So I'm glad you're having so much fun. And since I'm a person who, quote, retired at 48, and now here I am, you know, 32 years later, in a whole different life, I can understand why you decided to keep going.
Well, thank you. And, you know, I certainly, you know, I'm 77 and I just want other seniors to, you know, like look at someone like me, look at someone like you, look at anybody and say to themselves, you know, you always should chase your dreams. You're never too old to stop doing what you enjoy. And, you know, I just hope that that maybe the fact that I've got a debut novel at this age can be an inspiration to some people.
Well, I think it can be, you know, people are living longer and why not, you know, and it's nice to have a different act than the one that was sort of your main act. So
Exactly. It keeps life interesting. Yep,
right.
Absolutely.
So Patrick, thank you very much for the questions and the contributions. And Patrick's reminding you that we do have autographed copies of Pignon Scorbion and the Barbershop Detectives. So thanks for spending time with us. If you have nothing else to do, we're going to be launching Jonathan Kellerman's new book at 7 o'clock tonight, or 7 o'clock Mountain Time. And we'd love to have you come back for City of the Dead. And the worst part about City of the Dead is that it has one of the coolest endings ever, and I can't discuss it.
We don't have
really
them.
Going to annoy me.
We don't have the books yet either.
Yep. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks.
Night, Rick.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.